You may have seen headlines like these. The US government acquires a 10% stake in Intel, becoming its largest shareholder. This is not a normal deal. No money changed hands. And yet, the United States gained direct influence over its largest domestic foundry. The market reacted immediately, but the response was not entirely positive. On the surface, it looks like a simple investment, but the structure is completely different. Why Intel instead of Nvidia or Apple? And why would a government take a direct stake in a private company? What makes this even more unusual is how Trump handled the deal. He used a law that was originally passed under the Biden administration. The United States was pushing to bring critical industries like semiconductors, AI chips, and energy back onto its own soil. This was not just policy. It was a structural shift, an attempt to redesign the global supply chain around the United States. And in that process, every tech company faced the same reality: invest in America or absorb the cost. That reality became unmistakable in September 2025. President Trump gathered major tech CEOs at the White House Rose Garden. Tim Cook, Mark Zuckerberg, Sam Altman, Sundar Pichai, Satya Nadella, and Lisa Su. Even those who had clashed before were now sitting at the same table. That moment revealed something critical. In AI, semiconductors, and cloud, survival now depends on aligning with national strategy. Trump's approach was simple. Stay outside the US and face tariffs and regulation. Invest in the US and receive incentives. And as attention shifts towards this massive wave of investment, one question remains. In the middle of all this, where does Intel stand? The answer to that question is not as simple as it seems. This story goes back to 2022, when the global supply chain began to break down. At the time, the United States was facing a critical reality. Companies like Nvidia, AMD, and Apple were designing the world's most advanced chips, but they did not have the capacity to manufacture them at scale. More than 90% of advanced semiconductors were being produced by a single company, TSMC, in Taiwan. That concentration was the risk. A critical part of the global economy was tied to one region, a region exposed to geopolitical tension. If that supply chain were disrupted, the impact would be immediate. And for the United States, it would directly affect its technological power. So the United States decided to change that structure to bring semiconductor manufacturing back onto its own soil. That decision led to the CHIPS and Science Act. The government committed roughly $52 billion in subsidies to rebuild domestic manufacturing capacity. But this revealed another problem. Money alone could not fix a structural limitation. There was no US-based company that could match TSMC in both yield and production capability. And at that moment, attention shifted to one company, Intel. Intel was one of the few companies capable of both designing and manufacturing chips, and the only one with large-scale production inside the United States. From the government's perspective, it was the most realistic option. A symbol of American technology, with an existing domestic manufacturing base. On the surface, it looked like the perfect opportunity for a comeback. But the problem came after that. This shift began to expose fractures inside Intel itself. If you want to see how far those fractures go, this is the moment to subscribe. This channel is still small, which is exactly why each subscriber matters more. If you subscribe now, you'll be watching this unfold from the very beginning. But the reality is different. Intel is no longer where it once stood. It used to sit at the center of the semiconductor industry. Now it is falling behind, and the problem is not speed. It is a gap that has already opened. TSMC has moved beyond 3 nanometer and is pushing toward 2 nanometer, with stable production and the trust of major clients. Intel, meanwhile, has spent years dealing with delays and setbacks. Its roadmap kept slipping, and next-generation processors were pushed back again and again. But the problem does not end there. Intel is now fighting two battles at the same time. One is design. In CPUs, it competes with AMD. In AI chips, it faces NVIDIA. The other is manufacturing. In the foundry market, it must catch up with TSMC. Trying to win both at the same time is extremely difficult. That is why most companies focus on just one. NVIDIA focused on design. TSMC focused on manufacturing. But Intel tried to hold on to both, and as a result, it began to lose ground in both. Design was affected by manufacturing delays, and manufacturing became less efficient under increasing complexity. That is how Intel ended up here. So the US government made its move and chose Intel. This was not an emotional decision. The logic was simple. There was no alternative. The United States needs the ability to manufacture advanced semiconductors within its own borders. And that strategy led to one outcome: a 10% stake. That stake is not just a number. It represents influence over the company's direction, and if necessary, the ability to intervene. In other words, the US government is no longer just supporting Intel. It is stepping inside the company. This is a signal. Semiconductors are no longer driven by market logic alone. They are strategic assets shaped by state power. And Intel now sits at the center of that shift. This is no longer a choice. It is a role that has been assigned. In the end, the outcome of this decision will shape all of our futures. Intel is no longer just a company that makes chips. It has become something else, a large-scale experiment carrying the weight of a potential revival of American manufacturing. But there is no guarantee that this experiment will succeed. The government's 10% stake could serve as a powerful stabilizer for Intel. At the same time, it introduces a new variable into how the company makes decisions. Whether Intel can maintain the speed and flexibility of a private company under this structure remains uncertain, and the more important shift is happening outside the company. The fact that the US government is now Intel's largest shareholder sends a clear signal to the rest of the industry. Semiconductors are no longer just about technological competition. Governments are now directly shaping the direction of the industry itself. If this trend continues, the market may gradually shift toward a more state-driven structure. Can Intel use this moment to regain its competitiveness? Or was this decision already too late? One thing is certain: the answer will shape the technology we use and the direction of the entire industry. Right now, we are in the middle of that shift, and the outcome has not been decided yet. If you want to see where this goes next, check out the next video. I will see you there.